David Whyte, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So you are a poet, philosopher, writer, lecturer, and you've written a lot of books of poetry, poems, and we're going to talk about some of that today. You wrote this book a decade ago, 2 decades ago, called The Heart Aroused, about bringing soul back into the corporate world, into the office space. And I think that's really interesting because I think most people, when they think of poetry, they don't think of poetry speaking to office work. They might think of poetry maybe speaking to artisanal work or farmer, like a Wendell Berry. But for some reason, we for me at least, maybe it's just me, we often think, well, poetry, arts, literature has nothing to say about 21st century office work. Why do you think there's that disconnect? Like, why are we able to say, oh yes, we can have poetry about farms and agriculture, but not spreadsheets and sitting at a computer all day?
Well, the intuition is a good one because the language we tend to use in the office is so deracinated and it's been taken away from the racines, from the roots of real human experience. So we use euphemism, we use jargon, we use words to cover up what's actually going on because we daren't actually face up to a lot of the hierarchical imperatives that until now have steered relationships in the workplace. I think they're being broken apart now. So it's very hard to use the language of the office. You'll see none of my poetry used as the language of the office, really. You have to bring the greater human language to bear on the dynamics of the workplace, whether it's in the human resources department or in leadership or on the shop floor, on the line where people are working, actually doing physical work. So it just seems very, very evident to me that it's not a passive process to work. You can't work 40 hours a week in the classic sense and be someone else than the way you're made and not suffer from that covering over of who you are. The understanding, whether it's in physical work or whether it's in the offices, is, well, I'll recover myself at the weekend or on holiday. But actually, you're actually practicing at being someone when you're in your workplace. Imagine if you played an instrument, Brett, for the number of hours, the same number of hours that you do your work. So, say in a classic sense, if you practiced 6, 7, 8 hours a day at the piano, at the saxophone, at the violin, could you imagine how good you would get? And you wouldn't even have to have any musical proclivity. If you practiced so many hours a day, you would get incredibly good. So it's interesting to think that when you're in the workplace or on the phone or in the meeting room, you're actually practicing at being someone. And because you're practicing at it so much, 7 or 8 hours a day, 5 days a week at least, and if you're in leadership, it stretches into the weekends, there's no one else you're going to become than that person you're practicing so much at. So it's a very beautiful and disturbing question to ask yourself. By the way I am in my work, where I spend most of my time, whom am I practicing at becoming? Do I even want to become that person? Almost always, because of the manipulations and coercions and besiegements of the workplace, we almost always start to actually cultivate a defensive kind of personality in the workplace rather than an invitational one. So a lot of my work, as far as talking about the soul in the workplace, is that simple movement from a defensive to an invitational identity. I mean, you can look at the definition of the soul as being that part of a person. You don't need to attach it to any religious inheritance, but to my mind, the soul of a person is that part of a person that's trying to belong to the world in the biggest way they can. And the soul can be quite ruthless in breaking down defenses that you've set up, actually. Sometimes we look on the outside and realize that we've sabotaged the work we were doing, actually. And it looks as if you've actually inflicted self-harm. But to the soul, it may have been something it's been quietly engineering for years so that you could break out of this imprisonment. Being fired or being made bankrupt may be a disaster for the personality. It may be something your soul has been quietly preparing you for years.
Demons, be gone.
Be gone, demons.
Be gone.
Leave this studio!